everyone. This is Nicole Hardiman, Executive Director at Illinois River Watershed Partnership. This is an introductory video that accompanies several other tutorials we have curated to educate you about methods to improve water quality and conserve Northwest Arkansas's precious natural resources. This presentation will introduce you to the watershed and describe who we are and what we do at the Illinois River Watershed Partnership. After watching this presentation, we hope you'll watch the accompanying tutorials in an area of interest for you. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and I hope you find this informative. Here we have a map of the lovely Illinois River watershed. Just to orient you a bit, we have the four largest cities of the watershed in Bentonville and Rogers to the north, and the cities of Springdale and Fayetteville to the south. The river actually begins down in Hogeye, Arkansas, in the southern portion of Washington County, and flows north past Weddington Woods, where it turns west, flows just south of the city of Siloam Springs and into Oklahoma. The river turns south and flows down to Lake Tenkiller and then on to the Arkansas River from there. Generally speaking, whenever I use the term watershed, I am referring to a river with its associated tributaries and all of the land that surrounds it. Anywhere you are in the globe, you are in a watershed somewhere, and this is just the land surrounding the river within the Illinois River watershed. Within our watershed, we have the 14th fastest growing metropolitan area in what we collectively call Northwest Arkansas. In Fayetteville, we have the Clear Creek tributary or subwatershed. In Springdale, we have Spring Creek, for which the city is named. Rogers has the Osage Creek tributary, and Bentonville has within it the Little Osage Creek. So we at IRWP usually advocate with our cities for what we call low impact development or smart growth from a stormwater management perspective. Also within the watershed, we have the two top producing counties in the state of Arkansas for poultry and livestock production in the western and more rural areas. And in there we usually work with our farmers and landowners on what we call sustainable or regenerative agriculture. Over in the Oklahoma side, it's quite a bit more rural. There's the only bit of the Boston Mountain Range within Oklahoma is contained within the Illinois River watershed, which is interspersed with livestock and poultry operations as well. The watershed is about 1,600 square miles with a wide variety of conservation opportunity, which I will delve into the detail of. So a little bit about water quality in the Illinois River watershed. This figure is showing you phosphorus concentrations at the state line between Arkansas and Oklahoma since 1999. Phosphorus has been a water quality parameter of contention between the two states of Arkansas and Oklahoma historically. There is actually a Supreme Court decision back in the 90s regarding phosphorus concentrations in the Illinois River. And in this figure, you can see here at the top with the blue dots, the actual phosphorus concentrations since 1999. And in the red there, you can see the 3-month rolling average of phosphorus concentrations. And you can see there has been quite a bit of improvement since the 90s, but that we are still not meeting Oklahoma's numeric standard of 0.037 milligrams per liter on a regular basis. And it is the role of many entities across Arkansas and Oklahoma to get to that standard throughout the watershed. and meet Oklahoma's numeric standard for phosphorus concentrations. In addition to phosphorus concentrations, we here at IRWP also concentrate on what we call impairments for our subwatersheds. And essentially, these are water quality parameters that have been found to exceed our state standard in Arkansas. You can see here the subwatersheds and their associated impairments. So Sager Creek around Siloam Springs is impaired for nitrate. This is according to Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality's 2016 303D list. Moores Creek around Lincoln, Arkansas is impaired for sulfate and pathogens. Most of the other subwatersheds have similar impairments in the form of either pathogens and sulfate, with the Illinois River also having a chloride impairment. The mission of IRWP, and our mission is an important statement of what our staff and our board of directors is working towards every day, is to improve the integrity of the Illinois River through public education, community outreach, and implementation of conservation and restoration practices. And I'll give you an example in this presentation of how we work to fulfill that mission on a daily basis. Our board and our programming is composed of 6 what we call stakeholder groups. And so we have equal representation on our board of directors from each of these stakeholder groups. So for example, in agriculture, we have Arkansas and Oklahoma Farm Bureau representation. In business, we have representation from Arvest Bank and Craft and Toll. In conservation, we have representation from the Nature Conservancy. And really the intent is for these stakeholders to come together who may have differing agendas and different priorities and come to an agreement or consensus on projects and practices for IRWP to implement to fulfill our mission. We are supported by a wide variety of sponsors and partners, and it is through these sponsorships and partnerships that we are able to present our educational programming and implement our conservation and restoration practices. We are so very thankful to each of our sponsors for allowing us to advocate for the Illinois River in Arkansas and Oklahoma. In 2017, IRWP implemented our priority subwatershed strategy, and many of our programs take place and are targeted at these subwatersheds. We have 5 priority subwatersheds. Those include the Clear Creek subwatershed around Lake Fayetteville, the Moores Creek tributary around Lincoln, Muddy Fork around Prairie Grove, Arkansas, main stem of the Illinois River through the Lake Weddington or Weddington Woods area, and Sager Creek, which is around Siloam Springs, Arkansas. These are primarily driven by impairments as well as modeling studies looking at sediment and nutrient loading into the watershed. And is our intent to throw all our eggs in a few baskets and see if we can get quantified water quality improvement within those priority subwatersheds, basically increasing the bang for our buck. So at IRWP, we advocate for 6 kind of suites of best management practices. And really those best management practices are working towards 3 key concepts that we are trying to implement within the watershed. And one of those concepts is related to healthy soils. And you can have healthy soils in an urban context or on a rural farmland, but how do you get an impacted soil and how do you get an healthy soil? So you can see here in the picture in the lower left-hand corner that soils are not just an inanimate object. They are the growing media for our plants that are full of organic matter, are full of animals and bacteria that are helping the soil function, but also serves to help as a sponge for our watershed. You can see on the right-hand soil, when you get a compacted soil, either through the presence of livestock or urbanization activities like building a building, the compacted soil starts to act like a brick. So water cannot infiltrate through that compacted soil. Roots of plants cannot grow through compacted soils. And a healthy uncompacted soil will act like a sponge. So storm water will infiltrate down into the soils, and whenever you have this uncompacted soil, it enables the land to be able to absorb storm water and pollution. When you start to have rapid rates of urbanization or unhealthy soils in agricultural landscapes, you're essentially increasing the amount of storm water that's running across those surfaces, which can lead to its own water quality challenges, in addition to picking up any pollution that may be on the ground in the form of nutrients or motor oil or fertilizers or pesticides, and those will be directed to local creeks and streams. A second concept that we are trying to advocate for is prevention of erosion. So whenever you have that increased stormwater velocity and quantity from urban and rural lands, you will eventually destabilize the flow of that stream, and it will impact the surrounding lands by increasing erosion. You can see on the lower left-hand corner, in an urban context, we are essentially trying to reduce the amount of surface runoff. So when you build a home or a store or a mall, you are increasing the amount of surface runoff from that land and decreasing the amount of infiltration down into the soils. Erosion, which I'll talk more about in the context of the Illinois River, can lead to loss of productive lands. It's also a safety hazard to the people and animals that may be using that creek or stream, and can also lead to increased sediment and nutrient loading to the watershed itself. A third important concept that we focus on is protecting Arkansas wildlife. So in the Illinois River watershed, pre-development, it was actually, the land was mostly covered with prairies and forests, riparian forests in the prairie areas. And so healthy ecosystems essentially lead to clean water. You have that, those healthy soils that are infiltrating precipitation runoff. You have wildlife diversity from having a diversity of habitat and ecosystems. And whenever you have a healthy ecosystem, it can sustain much more wildlife than in a heavily impacted, land that's used by humans. So in 2020, IRWP's Board of Directors embarked on a strategic planning process, and this presentation will review some of the components of that strategic plan. One of the components is what we call a whole watershed approach. So admittedly, most of IRWP's activities in our 14-year history have occurred in the Arkansas portion of the watershed. But we really need to think about the whole watershed and what are the management activities that need to be implemented across the entire land, not just in Arkansas. So in 2020, we established some goals for how we are going to begin to operate in Oklahoma. We will establish our ecological assessment project, which I'll provide a little bit more detail to in subsequent slides. We really need to get to know our relevant stakeholders, landowners, and agencies in Oklahoma to the same extent that we work with our landowners, agencies, and stakeholders in Arkansas. And we're going to implement what we call mobile learning labs for local public schools in Oklahoma. By 2021, we hope to have a full-time presence in Oklahoma, most likely located in the city of Tahlequah. And we would like to launch our landowner services program, which I will speak a little bit more about subsequently. So our youth education program primarily occurs through two methods at our learning center located in Cave Springs, and then, as I mentioned, our mobile learning labs. In Cave Springs, we have a 30-acre outdoor classroom. You'll see here in the upper right-hand corner our learning center, which houses our auditorium as well as our offices. But across the street, we have 30 forested acres that include a 6-acre lake. And we will host about 2,000 students a year out at our outdoor classroom, where we take them on interpretive nature hikes. We do what we call macroinvertebrate sampling, so looking at the bugs that are in the water. We talk about caves, bats, and karst ecosystems. Karst is just another word for caves. There is a cave on the property where we have a threatened Ozark cavefish and an endangered gray bat that dwell within the cave. So caves are located throughout the watershed and an important component of our water quality ecosystem. Talk about human impacts to water quality, of course, and provide information specifically to the Illinois River watershed. Really, I say that we are on the front lines of nature deficit disorder with our youth education programming. We are just trying to get our local youth out into the watershed, understanding their place within it, what watershed occurs within their city, and what they can do to protect it. As far as our mobile learning labs, so essentially, we work with our partners in the field. We go out to schools. We are at community events, offering those same sorts of interactive activities. So for schools or homeschool groups or churches that can't afford or don't have the time to come to our learning center in Cave Springs, we will come to them and offer the same educational services as we offer to our field trip attendees. We do this across Arkansas and Oklahoma with a big focus on our priority subwatersheds. So we do have some watershed assessment projects. The intent of this is just to understand the condition of the watershed and then also assess the effectiveness of the projects that we implement. So I mentioned the ecological assessment project. So this project has occurred across 25 sites in Northwest Arkansas over the last 2 years. We've partnered with local East Initiative schools to implement this project. And as a part of this project, we do 3 types of assessments. We look at land use and aquatic habitat. So what's the condition of the riparian area? What's the condition of the stream bottom? We also look at macroinvertebrate communities. So what sorts of water bugs are found within the stream or creek? And then we collect some water quality parameters. In 2018 and 2019, we had 289 students that monitored 25 locations in the Illinois River watershed, as I mentioned, within Arkansas. We are hoping to expand this study to 10 sites within Oklahoma, and we'll be partnering with Oklahoma Conservation Commission's Blue Thumb program to do that. So this is the type of data that we produce from this study. You can see here 5 sites down on the x-axis related to the Clear Creek subwatershed, 5 sites for Moores Creek, 5 sites for Muddy Fork, 5 sites in the Sager Creek subwatershed, and 3 sites on the Goose Creek subwatershed. It's interesting to note that Goose Creek is not considered one of our priority subwatersheds and is not an impaired subwatershed, but we did include it just sort of as a control. So this is looking at macro invertebrate diversity scores, so just the different types of water bugs that we found at each of these sites. And it immediately becomes apparent that we have some sites that have very low diversity scores, the Clear Creek 4 site here, Muddy Fork 5. And really the intent of this is to focus our outreach efforts to those sites that fall below the average, so depicted by the black line here. And to identify tributaries and landowners and potential conservation and restoration projects within these specific tributaries. We only have a finite amount of money and capacity to work within the watershed, so this is really helping us to focus those limited resources. So we will be expanding this study into Oklahoma across 10 sites in 2020, and then our goal is to move back and forth between the 2 states every other year so that we can do some trend analysis over time. In 2017, we completed what we call a stream bank erosion inventory. This is the second assessment project that we are doing. And essentially what the erosion inventory did was examine 45 miles of stream bank to look at how much erosion is occurring. So we knew anecdotally through observations that erosion was happening, but we didn't know at what rate it was occurring and how much additional sediment and nutrient loading was occurring due to erosion. So based on our model estimates, we found that across the study area, we are losing laterally an average of 5.2 feet per year. And when you think about the value of that productive land and how much you can lose over a 10-year period, that's a pretty substantial economic loss. At the high range, we had a landowner that lost 42 feet within a year, and so a substantial amount of acreage. Based on our model estimates, we concluded that adds about 57,000 tons of sediment to the watershed just from the study area, and over 85,000 pounds of phosphorus loading from just stream bank erosion. That's not including the surface runoff from precipitation runoff running across the lands. To put that phosphorus loading number in perspective, so we have 4 large wastewater treatment facilities in the watershed, and our kind of back of the napkin calculations found that they contribute over 48,000 pounds per year. So just from our study area, we have doubled the amount of phosphorus loading compared to wastewater treatment facilities, indicating that we really need to address stream bank erosion either through preventing runoff in upstream reaches or doing stream bank restoration projects in more downstream and rural reaches of the river. A third assessment project that we are hoping to implement in 2020 is what's called the Secchi Dip-In. So this is a national program that's run by the North American Lake Management Society, And we would like to evaluate the reservoirs and lakes across the Illinois River watershed for water quality parameters, as well as looking at turbidity using the Secchi disk, as you see here in the center. In 2020, we are going to pilot the program in Lincoln Lake, which is in the Moores Creek subwatershed around Lincoln, Arkansas, and hoping to, this is sort of a citizen science project where volunteers will disperse throughout the reservoir and collect water samples for us, as well as do Secchi readings, and we will be reporting that data to the Lake Management Society for their use. On the riparian front, we launched in 2018 what we call the Riparian Restoration Program. So this is a $2.8 million program that is supported by Arkansas Natural Resources Commission and the Walton Family Foundation. And our goals, the three partners of the project, are to repair and restore 20 miles of riparian area, mostly through riparian reforestation efforts. You can see here in the picture a stream running through a field, and then we have planted trees with tree protectors around them, trying to really build up that reforested area, as well as establish 2 square miles of new rotational grazing systems. And rotational grazing has been found to really help out with those 3 concepts that we talked about earlier, with establishing or helping improve the health of the soils, helping to improve ecosystem function, as well as prevent erosion to local creeks and streams. And in the Riparian Restoration Program, we are funding a whole series of best management practices for water quality improvement. We will fund 75% of the cost of these practices, and we do ask the landowners to contribute 25% either financially or through their own labor, or through participation in a program with one of our partners like Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, Northwest Arkansas Land Trust, or U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So I have a couple of examples here of the different types of projects that we are implementing. Here is kind of an urbanizing example. So you can see here on the right-hand side of the photo, this is Johnson, Arkansas. To the left or west of the photo, Highway 49 runs. And here we have a large parcel of land that's owned by Springdale Water Utilities and managed by the City of Johnson. The City of Johnson really is interested in having this be a usable space for the residents and businesses in their city. There's a very large, you can see here to the north, what's called Johnson Square, the construction of that, which will be a mixed-use development site. And so what we have proposed to do for the landowners is to establish 41 acres of native warm season grasses, so increasing the amount of prairie lands in this area, as well as do some reforestation to the 2 tributaries that run through this parcel of land, as well as Clear Creek that runs to the southwest portion of the parcel here. And eventually we'll have some wetland improvement, as well as mowed walking paths through this parcel, so that it will both be a ecological functioning lands, as well as an educational and recreational resource for the community. A more agricultural and rural example is in Moores Creek. You can see here this parcel of land has 2 tributaries of Moores Creek that run through it. There's a small poultry operation on the parcel, as well as some pasture lands. This parcel of land actually used to occur within what we call an oak barren or oak savanna, so basically prairie interspersed with large oak trees. And you can see kind of the remnants of some of the prairie lands and the oak barren still on this piece of property. And so what we have proposed to the landowners is to establish a rotational grazing system as well as reforest their 2 tributaries. And so essentially this rotational grazing system will rotate across or around the poultry operation, but we'll also do some forest management in the areas that have some invasive woody early successional species on the west end of the property, and then we'll reforest those tributaries with native riparian species. So here's some example photos from projects that we did in 2019 at John Brown University. We did a prescribed burn up here on the upper left. You can see fencing for a new rotational grazing system on the upper right. And down below, this is a forest management project that we did with some landowners in Muddy Fork. And he wanted to skid the down trees with his horses, trying to reduce his greenhouse gas footprint. So we were able to accommodate that. One of the benefits of this program is we have pretty wide eligibility. So really any landowner within those priority subwatersheds, whether it be public land or private land, is eligible to participate. We really have a lot of flexibility in our agreements with the landowners on how we can implement these projects and how the landowners want to implement these projects. And so it really is a flexible program for our landowners with the intent of meeting our riparian restoration goals, regardless of the type of land or the type of landowner. A second restoration project that we will be implementing in 2020 is regarding unpaved roads. So across the Arkansas side of the watershed, we have just over 1,200 miles of unpaved roads. Unpaved roads can be a significant source of sediment loading to the local creeks and streams. And it's estimated that 1 mile of unpaved road in 1 year can deposit 18.8 tons of sediment, which leads to about 28 pounds per mile. And if you look at that across 1,200 miles, that's 36,000 pounds per mile of phosphorus loading. So we'll be working in Benton County this through 2020 and 2021 to implement best management practices for unpaved roads, and hopefully we'll be able to use those projects as educational demonstration sites for across Arkansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Kansas, and on what we can do to address sediment loading from unpaved roads. So we do provide a wide variety of educational services for our stakeholders and our landholders. So we have a series throughout the year of 6 what we call stakeholder educational field tours. And given our current COVID-19 situation, we're hoping to replace some of those field tours with the tutorials that you'll see accompanying this video. And we really focus in on these best management practices, a suite of best management practices for what you can do at your house to address stormwater. The what, why, and how of riparian buffers. A riparian buffer just being basically a forest around a creek, river, or stream. Our grazing school focuses on rotational grazing and the details on how to set those up. Our commercial low impact development field tour is essentially the residential field tour, but on a much larger scale. You can see here in this picture on the lower right-hand corner, this is the green roof at Crystal Bridges. There's the spider spider sculpture there, which is the largest green roof in the state of Arkansas. And then we partner with our local land holding organizations to drive awareness around land conservation. So if someone wants to conserve their farm or conserve their forested lands forever or even temporarily, what organizations and agencies do they need to engage in order to do that? We also do a series of newsletters and provide information on our social media and website. We also provide one-on-one consultations with our landowners and stakeholders on what they can do to improve water quality on their lands. We will also create customized conservation plans for all of our landowners. Those are free for landowners across the watershed. And you can see here in the upper right-hand corner a typical conservation plan, which is put together by RWP staff. So this is the Grand Valley neighborhood in Springdale. So we're working with this POA to address some of the challenges they have with their detention pond, as well as a tributary that runs to that detention pond. And we are putting together a plan for a prairie restoration project there. You can see in the lower left-hand corner a plan we've put together for a commercial business. Basically, what are some of the water quality challenges associated with the parking lots and building surfaces. And we've recommended a bioswale along the southern edge of the buildings there, and then conveying stormwater from the parking lots to a bioswale along the eastern edge. And we also serve as a liaison for our landowners and the agencies that provide technical and financial assistance for water quality improvement. Another service that we provide is advice for establishing local watershed groups. So we're a big watershed. It's tough to address all the issues across 1,600 square miles. But if there are, neighbors or a group of landowners that are interested in protecting their local creek or stream, we will provide resources and advice on how to kind of formalize a watershed group for that specific tributary. So why should you call IRWP? Why would you be interested in engaging with us? So if you're interested in participating in our riparian restoration program or our landowner services program with a one-on-one consultation, we would be happy to help you out with that. If you're ever curious about just current water quality issues or the status of particular projects in the Illinois River or even the state of Arkansas, we can answer questions from the public regarding that. And if you're interested in a custom conservation plan, please give us a call and we would be happy to put one of those together for you. So I thank you so much for your time. And here is our contact information. Again, my name is Nicole Hardiman. We can be reached at our general email address is contact@irwp.org. Our office phone number is 479-203-7084. You can also find us at our website, which is www.irwp.org. And again, I hope you will follow this up with looking at some of our sets of tutorials on best management practices and what you can do to improve water quality and conserve natural resources in Northwest Arkansas and Eastern Oklahoma. Thank you again and have a great day.